With the release of 3.3 alpha, there are new renders that we can make with geometry nodes that were not possible before. So, in this video, I'm going to show you a new feature that lets us make this render, and we're going to be making this result in general. So, look at that boy. Looks complicated. Kind of is complicated. Let's get into it. So, before we begin the tutorial, I should mention this video is sponsored by Socialbook. If you're in the market, and I'm sure there's a couple of you watching, if you're in the market for making a YouTube channel and growing it and making it more successful, and you're looking for tools, analytics, all that, Socialbook is for you. With analytics tools like looking up any channel and getting a stupid amount of information about its average views, cost per view, stuff like this, you can research channels that are in your field or even in a different field and figure out what are they doing right, what can I do right, stuff like this. But more exciting, in my opinion, is the tools you get when you sign up with Socialbook. So here are a couple that I think are pretty neat. The first one is Cartoonizer. You can just take a little photo of yourself. So here's a photo of me, send it through the Cartoonize filter, and you get an avatar that you can just use as a profile picture. You could use it on that little like circular avatar image that you have on YouTube. Another tool is you can take a photo again and remove the background, which you think is like, yeah, that's useful, but what's the point? If you're making thumbnails, this is a very useful thing because a lot of my thumbnails are basically like render, face in front of it, and normally you have to like cut it out yourself, but this is a automated approach. And speaking of removing backgrounds, another tool that is like next level AI, I don't know how it works, is you upload a video and it will remove the background as well. So you don't even need a green screen. Your background can just be a wall with a bunch of stuff in it, and you can remove the background and there is no need for a green screen, and it does it fairly well, surprisingly well, actually. If any of this interests you, if you're trying to grow a YouTube account and make it, more successful, have more people drawn to it, and you're looking to use tools that will help you, check out Socialbook. There's a link in the description where you can click and just make an account and all that. So check it out. I think it's super cool. I'm happy to be sponsored by Socialbook. And now, onto the tutorial. What we want to do is we want to take a cube and basically cut out a bunch of faces from it and to kind of show those outlines and have spheres. There's a lot going on. Let's do it step by step. First of all, how do we take a cube and cut out another cube from it? Well, what I can do is I can add in another cube. I want to cut something away, which is always a Boolean, and we're going to connect that there. I want to be able to see this cube. I'm just going to move it using a transform node so that it's actually cutting into the other one. So I'm just going to move it over here, view it, and there we go. We have one cutting into the other, okay? Because we're taking the difference. What I also want to do, and this is where the new feature comes in, as you can see, there's kind of like this intersecting window where the two meshes are overlapping, and we want to extract that. And in 3.3 alpha, we now have this intersecting edges thing that was not there before. So how do we reveal it? Well, it's basically a mesh at the moment. So I'm going to do a mesh to curve on this, which turns our whole thing into a curve, but I want to say only extract this section. So use the intersecting edges as a selection. And this works pretty well in my experience, right? You move this up and down. It can do complicated intersections, all that. I want to highlight it, so I'm going to do a curve to mesh. So first we extracted it, turned it into a curve, and now we are going to give it thickness by making it back into a mesh. Let's bring down the radius and make it not look like smooth garbage. So I'm going to make it shade flat and make it maybe 75% the size. So you could see now when we move this around, it's going to highlight our intersection window just like that. And we can preview all of this together by combining this with the Boolean from before. So you could see it's the same kind of intersection. We could do anything. We could rotate it on any axis, and it can get kind of complicated. And this is going to be the start of a new kind of suite of renders, but we can also do that, and it just works. So the next thing we want to do is kind of take the system that we made and make it work with a lot of cubes instead of just one. In other words, this input that goes into the Boolean, I'm just going to make it more complicated. So here's how we're going to do that. I'm going to take our original cube and I'm going to distribute points on faces. Why? To basically generate a bunch of cubes. So I'm going to make this a Poisson disk distribution, which basically means if I bring up this minimum, they're not going to be intersecting. There's going to be a minimum of 0.4 distance apart, and we can control the density here. And what I want to do is for each of these points, I want to have a cube. So boom. Now we have a bunch of cubes. Let's make them look a bit more interesting with a random value for the scale. And I'm going to make them slightly smaller overall. And maybe they shouldn't be able to get down to a size of 0. And maybe there should be less of them. Okay, a lot of stuff there. All I want to do is have the cube cut away these pieces, do the intersecting edges, all that, and all we need to do is plug this in, which hopefully doesn't lag us out. We will see. There we go. So you can see, it turns out we don't even have to realize instances, because it maybe just does that inherently. Either way, we have this. I'm thinking that these are a bit too thick. 0.04. There we go. And there we go. We changed the distribution. By changing the seed, we get different things. So now we just kind of want to hone in the look of this. So I want this to have bigger cubes on average, so it starts cutting away. And you can see sometimes cubes are kind of joining together and making these weird intersections. I like the look of that. And I want this to evolve over time and not just be a static mesh. But this is a cool way to make a nice, abstract mesh. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these points that are basically generating these cubes, and I'm going to animate them over time. Anytime we want to change the position, we use a set position, and I'm going to offset them with some noise. Every time you add a noise texture, on average, it adds 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. So I'm just going to subtract that to center it. And let's also have control over the scale or intensity of this. Okay? Final thing. I want to evolve this over time, which was the whole point. So take your W slider, plug it into seconds, and look at that. We got jitter. Does it look good? No. Can we make it look good? Yes. So take this. It's basically going too fast, first of all. So I'm going to make it 5 times slower. And it's kind of jittering too small, like it's not going that far. So I'm going to increase the range that it's going. What's happening here? We have a bunch of cubes that we are now jiggling around. By the way, it's probably better to use color. That way it's moving on X, Y, and Z. We have a bunch of cubes that are jiggling around. It's cutting into our mesh. It's generating these curves. And you combine them all together. And I think it looks pretty cool. Now that we use the color thing, I'm going to make this smaller, make it evolve a bit slower. And there we go. Final thing or two to kind of add visual interest here is I'm going to have this thing rotate 1, so it's kind of harder to follow the pattern. And I'm going to have spheres kind of coming in and out as if they're cutting away from the thing. So let's do the spheres first, which is actually easy. I'm going to use another instance on points, use the same set position points that are randomized. And I want to say, for each of these, give it a sphere, which looks like this. So it's going to be the same thing as the cubes, but now they're spheres. And for these spheres, I want to make them more interesting. We can use the same random value from before. If I can find it, connect that there. And now we have spheres. Because they're in the same position as the cubes, so you can see these are interchangeable. Because they're in the same position, if we are now to put them in our join at the very end, it's going to look like the spheres are cutting away from our cube, because they're in the same position as the cube, which are actually cutting away the thing. Okay, tiny modifications. I want the spheres to be smaller on average. I want them to be set shade smooth. And there we go. Maybe they could be a bit bigger than that. So again, to add visual interest, I'm just going to have this thing rotate. So hash frame is a driver divided by 30. We'll take the frame number and make it 30 times slower. I'm also going to add some on the y-axis by different factor. And there we go. Really, the rest of this is picking materials and all this. And I'll just say, if you want a different material for the cube, and then for this outline thing, just the way you would do that is for the outline, I would make a material node, set material, one for this, and then one for the rest of this, or you could have them all separate. Is the way I would do that. But in general, that is how you get the look of this. Let me just show you what it looks like in cycles without any materials, because the materials are just kind of like, you just kind of slap them on top. I think it looks pretty neat. Again, the main takeaway from this tutorial is the intersecting edges thing that wasn't there before. Either way, I think I'm pretty happy with that recording. How long did we go for? 8 minutes? Sounds good to me. So, we're about to get personal. Thank you for watching my tutorial all the way to completion, and as always, I like to promote at the end of these the ever-living what? Plastic ring that I'm 3D printing out of my Patreon. So, what's Patreon about? If you like what I do here on CG Matter, on Default Cube, all this, and you want to support free tutorials that I can just keep on making, increase that knowledge base, Patreon is the best way to support what I do directly. It really is. But you get 3 benefits in return. 1, you get early access to tutorials. I'm building up a monster catalog right now. You could watch tutorials before they come out. Second of all, you can get the blend file. So I'm going to give the final blend with the materials and all this, just available for download. Anything I've uploaded since 2019, also available. Hundreds of project files and blend files. You can just download those immediately. And thirdly, exclusive tutorials that are only available for patrons. I make those every once in a while. I actually made one yesterday about distributing points inside a volume using the volume cube node, which is a new approach. Either way, thank you so much for watching to completion, which is cool, and I will see you on the next one.